Hello and welcome to this inaugural video exploring the pinnacle of gaming creativity and other strokes of gaming genius. Just a little disclaimer here, I'm on a really cheap microphone on a really bad headset, so maybe I'll upgrade that at some point, but for now I apologize. For this episode, I couldn't think of a better game to start off with than the one and only Dungeon Keeper. As far as unique games go, this one stood alone back when it was released. Perhaps other games have had you play the bad guy before, but nothing on the scale and depth of Dungeon Keeper. I admit that I've got some nostalgic feelies for this game, but its quality and originality are hard to deny. It's also one of those games that's often imitated but never duplicated. The closest anyone has come to this is the Kickstarter project War for the Overworld. Still, nothing's captured the magic of the original since, so it remains at the top of the, quote, evil is good mountain. Dungeon Keeper is the brainchild of pathological overpromiser Peter Molyneux of Black and White and Fable fame. But before all that, his studio, Bullfrog Productions, made some of the most innovative games around. Populous was the OG God game, at least it was the first one that was popular. Theme Park was arguably one of the pillars that holds up the entire tycoon genre. And Theme Hospital was a parody of the hospital system with its fictitious diseases and apathetic staff. There's nothing like curing the squits or King Complex while shooting rats as they scurry under the soda machines. They also made a little game called Magic Carpet, where you were an apprentice wizard on a quest for vengeance and power. And, not surprisingly, you flew around on a magic carpet killing mythical creatures. But also, you were curating an entire kingdom that would grow and thrive and protect you if you treated it right. Almost all these games are on my list for having some element of genius, but who knows if I'll ever get a chance to cover them all. Bullfrog had dealt with grit and grime and darkness before with several of their games, so it was only natural to make a game as dark as a tortured soul with the tedium and occasional hilarity of real life. Dungeon Keeper oozes charm at every turn despite the frankly grotesque theme of the game. The intro hints at this as a hapless hero is confronted by a Jabba-like bile demon who performs a Three Stooges-style boop between the eyes just before he gets his head taken off by a horned reaper, the penultimate warrior/diva in the game. So loading into the game is fairly standard, with you being able to choose between single player and multiplayer. There's high scores for some reason, and a few other options to play around with. However, the meat of the game is in the story mode, where the ever-talented Richard Riding speaks with disdain at the happiness and carefree overworld that you're about to defile.
Polite bartering has led to extreme compassion and assertive contentment in this area. Not even a thick-skinned troll could survive the understanding and help these scummy people can provide.
Completing a mission leads to a suitably changed section of the overworld map and a congratulatory outro, informing you of the populace's new way of life.
Darkana. The surviving citizens have more on their plates than a demon spawn with 3 dead adventurers to munch. Not that many citizens have survived as such.
For a game made in 1997, Dungeon Keeper's graphics are, well, odd. The game engine can't seem to display straight lines from an isometric perspective, and it's initially pretty disorienting and unsettling. But it's really funny how an engine limitation can lead to visuals that are unique and utterly befitting of the title as a whole. For one, I couldn't imagine Dungeon Keeper without the squiggly walls all over the place. Remember that charm I was speaking of earlier? It's everywhere. Your bird's eye view will catch a little brown creature moving around, and you will soon be introduced to the backbone of your empire, the imp. These little guys are so ugly they're cute, but they're 100% expendable. More on that later. Heck, within the first 5 minutes, you're instructed on how to slap your minions in order to make them work harder. This subjugation continues as you direct your imps to dig the surrounding dirt to form your first few rooms. See, your cursor is a disembodied necrotic hand. It's the perfect analog for your presence in the world. From moving minions to carving out cave networks to casting spells, your hand pulls you into the game in a way that's beyond other games of its type. And it's these little things that make Dungeon Keeper such a gem. Just slap a chicken for effect. Or listen to the grumbling of a troll when you yank it out of the workshop to face almost certain death at the hands of some do-gooders testing your defenses. After building some requisite rooms like a treasury and a lair, you'll direct your imps to dig their way to a portal. They'll do a little dance to claim it, and your first minions will begin to arrive. The minions you attract will have their own needs and sometimes can be overly needy, like the Horned Reaper I spoke about earlier.
Your creatures are becoming angry.
The gameplay ramifications all stem from one minion type disliking another, and at different times and in different places. For example, spiders prey upon flies, so if both set up shop in the same lair, that fly's gonna get killed. If your warlocks grow tired of minions running through their research area, they'll pick a fight. And if a Horned Reaper doesn't have a little fully furnished apartment of his own, preferably behind a locked door, pretty much all of your denizens are going to get curb stomped as he flies into a diva rage and begins to slaughter everything on his path out of your dungeon. Infighting is something you never see in games, and it really does bring the dungeon to life. See, it's all a game of balance. Those warlocks I spoke of before, they research spells, all of which cost gold to cast. Well, gold is also required for building your dungeons, training, worshipping, scavenging, but most importantly, for payroll.
It is payday.
Yep, you have to pony up to retain your minions' loyalty for whatever that's worth. Lower level common creatures don't cost that much, but when you have a level 10 dragon walking through your halls, you're gonna want to make darn sure you've got some cash on hand. As such, the game flows in a manner pretty uncommon in today's world. It's all about the gold and how fast you can mine it. Most gold veins in the world are one-time cash infusions that your imps dig from the earth. Occasionally, however, you'll find a gem deposit, and it never runs out. You'd think that's the I win button, right? And in some cases, you would be right. But once the fighting starts and heroes and even enemy keepers' minions start knocking on your door, you're going to want a huge stockpile of money to fend off the hordes. Every lightning strike costs a minimum of several hundred gold, but it only tickles the stronger enemies. So you'll have to charge it up for 1,000 gold a strike to cause any real damage in a battle. Add to this your minions needing to be healed, also costing money, as they take damage, and the loss of imps to traps and such. Well, money may be easy to come by, but it disappears in the blink of an eye.
Creatures are under attack.
Battles are where everything gets chaotic. This is easily the weakest point of the game. Every minion has a level, and with those levels comes additional skills and spells that the minion can cast. A level 10 warlock is an absolute beast, but a level 1 warlock is cannon fodder for practically anything. As cool as that is, it ultimately comes down to picking up as many minions as you can and dropping them on the heads of the good guys. You have other options as to how you handle battles, but it's almost always chaotic, and you have far less control than you do in other aspects of the game. It's manageable at the start for the first few levels, but once the dungeon keepers begin competing with you, it's essentially a game of attrition. Once battle is resolved, your imps carry the wounded back to their lairs to heal, and you have the option to jail your downed enemies or leave them to rot. Thus begins the advanced portion of the game. There's a circle of life here that you can choose how deep you want to go into it. If you jail your enemies, you can let them die there, or you can torture them. Great choices, right? If you let them die, or you kill them yourself, you'll get a skeleton to add to your ranks. If you torture them, you'll have the opportunity to convert them to your cause. But you'll have to keep them healed up for as long as it takes to convince them that you're the new master. And that costs money and constant attention. If you fail to do so, you'll be rewarded with a ghost, which is a nice scouting unit. When minions die, they'll be taken to a graveyard, which can produce a vampire. This guy emerges when enough bodies decompose and are very powerful beings, but they're a little fickle. So winning or losing a battle is just as much about adding or removing from your ranks as it is defending or attacking for territory. Your dungeon dwellers are the hidden currency in this game. You can lay as many traps and place as many doors as you want, but if you don't have a mobile force, you're as good as banished. So, the cycle of death and undeath creates a way to bolster your forces at the expense of having creatures with unique abilities. But if you just want to outright steal creatures from opposing keepers, you can do that as well. Just invest heavily into a scavenger room, which will, depending on whom you place into it, will attract enemy minions straight from their old master to you. You can even build a temple and sacrifice combinations of minions to summon a powerful unit as a reward.
The gods are pleased with your sacrifice. The gods have rewarded your offering.
This ebb and flow of you acquiring your units, figuring out where they should spend their time, and dropping them into battle is the core gameplay loop. It's subtle and nuanced. Do you take the time to train a warlock in the training room, or do you toss him into the library to research? Do you keep that high-level dark mistress, or do you toss her into the sacrificial pool in an effort to summon a horned reaper? It's your choice, and even if you mess up, there's usually room to fix things. Each map in the game is also hidden initially by the fog of war. You have a general idea of its layout, but the specifics are hidden from you. You can either use scouting units or spells to reveal portions of the map, and the environment often becomes an enemy in itself. There are always small hidden crates throughout a map that let you do anything from raise the level of all your creatures, to unlocking hidden levels, to allowing you to bring a minion with you into the next dungeon. You'll want these crates, and you'll often have to perform a number of tasks to find and extract them. The exploration required adds to the ambiance while you direct your all-seeing eye to the darkest corners of the game world as you zoom around trying to see what else is out there and what dangers you have to overcome. Extraction of these crates requires an imp to grab the chest and bring it back to your dungeon, so anything standing between it and your imp can cost you said imp if you're not careful. You'll continue level by level in a slowly escalating fashion, gaining your full dastardly toolkit after about half of the game. Once heroes stop being your primary threat, you'll have to face off with up to several other keepers at one time, sometimes culminating in a battle with overpowered heroes at the end. This can get a little stale, but the joy of building your evil ecosystem over and over with better rooms and denizens is what keeps everyone coming back. Dungeon Keeper is also a masterclass on both music and sound effects. Everything you hear is easy to interpret, and almost instantly you know what it means. Many sounds are sensationalized to almost cartoonish levels, so they stand out from one another. The minions themselves are very distinct in the sounds they emit, so much so that even their attack sounds can be clearly heard in the middle of a huge skirmish. You feel every sword strike, every hit on a training dummy, every chicken dying as it becomes dinner for whatever horror is hungry at the moment. It does get a little messy when 15 units are all shouting and attacking one another at the same time, but if you listen carefully enough, you can figure out what's going on even if you close your eyes. That's how good the sound design is.
Your creatures are attacking the enemy. Your creatures are under attack.
With respect to music, I'm not normally a fan of Red Book audio. For the uninitiated, Red Book audio is the music that streams from the CD instead of being in MIDI or digitized format coming from your sound card. It plays just like a CD in a CD player. The primary problem with it is that it sacrifices playtime for quality. You only get 40 or 50 minutes of music, tops, but Dungeon Keeper is the exception here. The wonderful ambient hellscape that is established by the game's soundtrack could easily be placed into any Halloween party and no one would know the difference. It ranges from dread-inducing horror to industrial techno rock, and I don't think I've ever heard anything like it since. It just doesn't get old, even though there aren't that many tracks. So why do I gush on Dungeon Keeper? Well, to be honest, it's the whole game. The premise, the setting, the atmosphere, the humor, the management, the evil. It's all just the perfect storm of ideas that came together to completely eclipse any design flaws or bugs in the game. I genuinely feel like a horrible boss as I slap the crap out of my imps and make them dig up gold a little faster, so I can cast that extra spell to finally erase that stupid level 10 champion that's been killing my minions and slowing down my research. I feel impunity and disdain while playing this game that I've never felt since. It rewards you for treating life and unlife as mere currency in a grander game. And it accomplished this all in 1997. That was more than 20 years ago, and it's still just as playable today as it once was. Dungeon Keeper was released exactly when the industry needed it to be released. It's like the Adult Swim part of the Cartoon Network. It pulled no punches, and it handed you the keys to explore exactly how cruel you could be to little computer creatures. It didn't garner the attention it deserved due to other titles that were released around the same time, and they appealed to a wider range of players. But I felt a twinge of remorse when I healed that dwarf languishing in my torture chamber because he wasn't broken yet. So you don't get those feelings while playing an FPS. You don't get those feelings while playing an RTS. It's hard to even get that feeling sometimes when playing an RPG. So your units in a normal RTS are just different guns with different sounds and different sprites and models. Dungeon Keeper forced you to appreciate every unit type, and you respected them, not only for their prowess in combat, but how they helped your dungeon evolve and grow stronger. Behind all of this flows a blissful stream of micro and macro management that is cathartic and frenetic at the same time. So the genius here is simply the sum of the parts. Just the setting alone would have been enough, but all these ingredients in this witch's brew of this game make it a standout in almost every area from start to finish. Dungeon Keeper ranks as one of my top 25 of all time, and I fear that that feeling of devilish wonder will never be represented so perfectly in a game again. See, Dungeon Keeper would be a risky game today. It risks not being playable by 10 million people, so it probably won't get made. And indie studios have already tried to replicate it. In addition, I think it's the type of game that can only really be done once. Yes, War for the Overworld is really good, but it's competing with itself to try to one-up the Dungeon Keeper formula. It's fresh and certainly the best attempt, but I think it falls short in character. In today's gaming universe, we've seen everything. Dungeon Keeper was so out of left field at the time and so expertly designed that it will always be the definitive dungeon builder. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll find my next game just as tantalizing. Here's a hint. It's the first true 3D real-time strategy game, and I'm not talking about Warcraft 3. So we'll see you next time for more gaming genius.